The Connections. Written by Semi Oguzjan. A level-headed view of the world takes courage more than ever. The book presents an enlightening perspective on the nature of technology and raises a question: are we kidding ourselves? Author's note: this book is intended for audiences who want to do good in this world and want to have a clear view of the situation. A layman would be satisfied with superficial and half-baked answers, but we expect more than the views of a layman from this book. Exactly for this reason, I want the reader to be open-minded and entertain these ideas objectively, as many of the ideas might be alien, complex, shocking or scary to those who are new to them. The book is relatively short, as I wanted to exclude anything unnecessary, and tried to give you the crucial knowledge in a concentrated, clear, convincing and well-organized form. Please do not expect pointless entertainment from it. This is not a drug but a cure. Enjoy reading, and don't forget to live in here and now as much as you can. By reading this book, one can understand the core of the often misunderstood ancient Daoist and Zen philosophies better. These ancient ideas include aligning with the natural way Wu Wei, and living a simple life free from unnatural distractions, and avoiding and healing the traumas that are spreading within the system due to the imbalances caused by novel technologies. This book is complementary to the documentary, The Connections, 2021, short documentary, and the online video lecture, Civilization 101: The Untold Dark Secret of Civilization, prepared by the author. Chapter 1: Defining Technology. Living in probably the most technologically advanced era of all times, we depend on, use, develop, enjoy and complain about technology. Technology to us is what water is to fish. Having said that, how many people can define technology? It is so recognizable, one might think, that they didn't even feel the need to stop and think about it consciously. One might say with cold confidence that technology is what humans produce with natural resources such as metals, water, fossil fuels, wood and minerals. Technology enables us to increase efficiency, overcome problems and conquer new niches. Humans can produce it because, unlike others, humans are very creative and intelligent species. Humans also have science, which adds on even more to their intelligence. So far, a layman would be satisfied with these answers, but we expect more than the views of a layman from this book. Exactly for this reason, I want the reader to be open-minded and entertain these ideas objectively, as many of the ideas might be alien, shocking or scary to those who are new to them. If we look at closely to the nature, we realize that the nature is also incredibly creative and intelligent to the degree that it inspired people and birthed countless religions. Science, as a subset of evolution, is a method based on trial and error to figure out which theories are best matching to the observations of one's environment. Nature also uses science. Evolution by natural selection is a method based on trial and error to figure out which species are best matching to their environment. If nature can accumulate knowledge by using trial and error, can be creative and intelligent, and shape natural resources such as metals, water, fossil fuels, wood and minerals into beings in a way to maximize efficiency, then, what is technology? As we have realized, under careful inspection, these definitions of technology given by a layman can be shown to be meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Considering the vagueness of the above definitions, it is time that we define it properly. Technology can be defined as a subsystem that changes relatively much more rapidly towards a more organized state compared to the rest of the system to the degree that it reduces the level of organization in the rest of the system. At this point, one may raise the question if a meteor striking the Earth and its shockwaves can be considered as technologies or not. After all, it is difficult to imagine a more rapid event on Earth than a meteor strike. A careful look at the above definition of technology is sufficient to answer this question. For a system to be defined as technology, unlike the disintegrating meteor, it should become more organized over time. Hence, according to our definition, the extinction of dinosaurs was not caused by technology, it was caused by a meteor strike. There are events, however, such as the introduction of invasive species into an ecosystem, that surprisingly can be classified as technology under the above definition. In that sense, technology is a subset of relatively fast-changing systems, and as we will see later, such systems tend to destroy their surroundings. As we just defined the meaning of technology, from now on we will call anything technological unnatural. Let's list some generalized examples to unnatural things: cars, ships, invasive species, humans living in modern houses, livestock industry, public or private schools, money, banks, mass media, internet, books, modern musical instruments, etc. As one can see, many of these unnatural things are considered as beneficial by most people. This is because of the fact that most people are unnatural, technological. This will be clearer when we discuss the main principles that cause humans to reduce the level of organization in the rest of the system. Why can't we just get along with the nature? Further conclusions can be made from the above discussion. First, technology cannot be defined in a vacuum, but can only be defined relative to its surroundings. For this reason, a system that is considered as a technology at one time might not be considered as a technology at another time, when the circumstances are different. This should be obvious if we imagine a world where evolution of mechanical robots, rather than the biological life, occurred on Earth. Those robots would not call themselves technology, they would consider themselves as just life. Another conclusion is that humans who survive by using technology can also be considered as a part, an extension of technology. A third conclusion might arise from the realization that some novel things that we normally consider as technology might actually restore the natural balance that is disturbed by other technologies by destroying them. An example to this is a hypothetical case in which this book would convince humanity to gradually reduce the use of technology, which doing so is necessary for the well-being of all biological species, including humans. As you can see, this is as likely as spotting a unicorn while scuba diving. The proportion of human-made novel things that are beneficial to nature is so low that we can practically define any novelty by humans, including ideas and cultures, as technology. Chapter 2: People's Perception of Technology. When it comes to technology, due to the complexity of the situation, people tend not to have clear and consistent opinions about the effects of it. They tend to describe technology as a gray area, where some good and some bad happen, but they usually tip the balance towards technology being overall beneficial. This is because of the fact that they depend on it, hence they don't want to admit that they might be a part of a destructive force. Let me give you 3 examples of such contradictory behavior. They might complain about the environmental pollution, while they want to earn more money to consume more, leading to more pollution. They might wish that people in other countries earn a decent wage, while wanting to benefit from the cheap products produced by those populations. They might get angry at people who cage dogs and consume their flesh, while consuming cow, sheep, duck, turkey, chicken, pig, fish or other animals' flesh themselves. The common cause of these contradictory behaviors is the clash between their natural instincts and their cultures that are shaped by the technological civilization. People like to think that they are in control of the technological civilization, and that they are good people. When they realize that actually the technological civilization is in control of them, and that it is forcing them to do harmful things, they delude themselves, usually by addictions and denial, to cover up the reality. People who suffer from the cognitive dissonance caused by taking the values, dogmas, and rules of the technological civilization too seriously can never find peace within themselves. Therefore, the path to true happiness for the modern human passes from a sense of disdain towards the technological civilization. This includes not expecting health from the medical industry, but rather trusting and correctly nurturing one's own body. We should stop seeking validation from the technological civilization and from the people who are polluted by it. We must realize that the technological civilization doesn't just pollute rivers, but it also pollutes people's bodies and minds. Unfortunately, very few people realize this. Instead, they see the technological civilization as their savior. They force themselves towards the opposite direction to comply with the technological civilization and associated cultures, and by doing so they deepen their traumas. Chapter 3: What is so bad about it and why? We can list various environmental problems such as climate change, ocean acidification, deforestation, soil loss, pollution, biodiversity loss, resource depletion, etc., to conclude that technology is harming Mother Nature. Mother Nature, as some personalize her as Pachamama in South America, or Gaia in Greek mythology, can be considered as the victim of technology. From a moral perspective, the act of technological development is immoral because it plunders, pollutes and harms Mother Nature. This view does not convince everyone, because some people see nature as a collection of wood, rocks and water. Others argue that the technological development itself is a part of the natural progress, hence Mother Nature brought this to herself, and we should trust her wisdom. Others refuse that Mother Nature can have wisdom about the future, because evolution is a blind process, and what happened in the past is not relevant to what will happen in the future. The latter can be dismissed by realizing that the nature accumulates solutions over time by evolution, and she is not that blind moving forward towards the future. Materialistic view of the nature can also be easily dismissed as the nature, just like us humans, is a self-organizing entity, and not a pile of materials waiting to be exploited. What is left to examine is that the technology is a part of the natural progress, and there is a wisdom to it. In this view, technology is just another evolutionary risk-taking, an experiment to further evolutionary process into new niches, an attempt for increasing diversity, so to speak. And there is some truth to this view. Despite this realization, the conflict arises when some environmentalists claim, based on the current observations and projections, that technology is causing a loss in biological diversity, and that technology is a dead-end experiment which will cause immense suffering and leave Mother Nature crippled for a long time. It is the updated view of someone who looks around and says, the experiment is failing, must abort. So, the question becomes, is there any legitimate reason to believe that the experiment of technology will fail humanity, let alone failing other biological species? Sure, technology is causing the ongoing sixth mass extinction, but cannot we cherish it and use it wiser and more intelligently to reverse the destruction, or at least make it bearable? The short answer, as we are now going to explain, is a no. To be able to understand the fundamental problem with technology, first we need to get familiar with the concept of harmony. Evolution is a process that, over time, creates connections, organization, harmonies, less likely outcomes, low entropy states. These are all just different terms for the same thing. We can get a sense of it when we observe a flower blooming from the mud and feel how special that is, how magical, how harmonious, how organized, how unlikely. The flower is directly or indirectly connected to the soil, the sun, the bees, the clouds, and practically everything else. The existence of the flower depends on the bees, and vice versa. They are specialized for each other. Now, imagine what would happen if the bees change so rapidly in a few hours that they have suddenly become a novel species that cannot pollinate the flower. The flower would be extinct if it didn't have any other pollinator, as well as the morphed bees if they couldn't find any other food source. On the other hand, if the bees have changed over hundreds of thousands of years, the flower would have had sufficient time to change and adapt, keeping the harmony with the bees. Here lies our first principle to keep in mind: species, or subsystems, that change much faster than the rest sever their bonds with the rest. As the ecosystem is a highly connected web of species, the severed connections between two species can ripple within the ecosystem, disrupting the well-being of other species as well. This is a well-known phenomenon, as also mentioned by others, All species are connected to others through ecological interactions. Extinctions therefore reverberate through ecosystems, as do extirpations of local populations and declines in abundance, which are widespread even in species not close to extinction. An example can be the extinction of a specialized bug that depend on the extinct flower for its survival. From this, we see that each species should evolve in a way that enables other species to catch up. If not, they would harm the ecosystem that they depend on. And this is not just true for species, but also true for lakes, rocks, soils, air, etc. If a species rapidly changes the composition of water bodies by adding or subtracting chemicals to or from it, that species, as well as other species who are adapted to living with the previous water composition, would be impacted negatively. Again, relatively rapid changes in any part of the ecosystem, living or non-living, sever the connections within that ecosystem. Humans are a species that is changing rapidly due to the technological advances. Technology is very rapidly changing the composition of our atmosphere, water, soil and populations of species at an exponential rate. There is a fundamental reason for technology behaving this way. Unlike the biological evolution, which is based on molecular reproduction, the modern technological evolution is electronic, evolving at the rate of neurological or electronic signals, which are much faster compared to the chemical processes involved in biological evolution. The two different modes of evolution, molecular and electronic, existing without co-evolving, renders the biological life incompatible with the modern technology. There is an important point to be clarified. A rapidly evolving system can coexist with a slowly evolving system if and only if they have co-evolved at least from the point of evolutionary rate differentiation, or the slowly evolving system came into existence after the rapidly evolving system. In other words, a rapidly evolving system cannot come into existence in a slowly evolving system and expect to be sustainable. An example to this phenomenon can be observed in our own bodies. It is known that the viruses can evolve much more rapidly than the biological human species, yet, humans and viruses can coexist, because they have co-evolved together from the earliest ancestors. If there were no such thing as viruses, human bodies would not feel the need to evolve immune systems against them. And if suddenly a virus would come into existence, human species wouldn't have enough time to develop immune systems against the virus, and the virus would wipe out the human species, or wipe out itself due to the high death rates of infected humans. Modern technology is similar to such a virus. Figure 1 illustrates the hypothetical process of the creation of exponentially growing problems, which in return triggers the introduction of exponentially growing false solutions by the technological civilization. This hypothesis matches the observations in the real world, where technology and environmental problems are growing in an exponential manner, for example, fossil fuel and energy consumption, the human population, the carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, the number of regional heat waves per year, or the number of species extinct per year. In Figure 1, initially humanity had a problem, represented by solid triangle, but humans came up with the first wave of false solutions, represented by dashed square, which led to the first wave of environmental, social, psychological and technological problems are represented by solid star, subsequently triggering further false solutions, represented by square, that started a second, bigger wave of disruption. False solutions are perpetually created, because they cause rapid changes in the technological system technosphere, which in turn further sever the connections, as we have discussed, eventually returning back as more problems. In fact, the technological civilization, technosphere, is itself an accumulation of such false solutions. Problems grow exponentially, both inside and outside of the technological civilization, because there is more than one path that can be drawn from the false technological solution back to the technosphere. This way, a problem created by rapidly changing technologies proposed as a solution can ripple in the whole system and return back to the technosphere from multiple places and directions. This is known as a positive feedback loop, which leads to imbalance and subsequent exponential growth. People who defend technology like to focus on the exponentially growing false solutions such as cars, computers, satellites, vaccines, phones, nuclear energy plants, batteries, etc., while ignoring the much more rapidly growing problems, see Figure 2. This exponential growth, however, cannot continue indefinitely, as the unsolved problems will reach to a point that will trigger catastrophic tipping points, eventually, in the long term, leading to the collapse of the technological civilization, or the biological life, or both. Until now, as mentioned before, all these fit into our observations of the real world. But wait a minute, if you are following carefully, you might ask the question: is there a chance that a small technological intervention will not create any detectable problems? After all, there must be some stability to the ecosystem. At this point, I must admit that I didn't tell you the full story in detail for the sake of firstly describing the simpler concepts. You asked a crucial question, and the answer involves the concept of thresholds, also called tipping points. We have actually hidden the concept of thresholds in our definition of technology given in the section, Defining Technology, of this book within the words, to the degree that. So, without even realizing, we have already defined technology as a rapid disruption that triggers tipping points. In this aspect, we can only talk about the risk of triggering tipping points that can create detectable magnitude of problems by exceeding our tolerance threshold that will initiate another false solution response. And these thresholds range from finely structured, such as the minimum number of humans that will lead to the opening of a new bakery, to very coarse, such as the minimum temperature anomaly that will lead to a runaway climate change. By our new understanding, we can more accurately say that Figure 1 illustrates the hypothetical process of the risk of creating exponentially growing problems, which in return triggers the introduction of exponentially growing false solutions by the technological civilization. Then, how do we know that we are triggering various tipping points? We know that we are triggering various tipping points from the fact that if we haven't triggered them by our technology, we wouldn't observe exponential rapid growth in neither false solutions nor problems that we face. Our technological civilization is full of examples of creating further problems by the invention of novel technologies, and we can list some of them in simplified form. Invention of agriculture leading to wars over land and invention of money and governments, invention of money leading to global trade and disintegration of local communities that enabled further colonization, invention of internal combustion engine leading to climate change, sedentary lifestyle, and auto-transport-oriented cities. In reality, all these inventions directly or indirectly interact with each other to worsen the problems. Is it possible, then, to find a very clever true solution that will not create further problems in the future? For this to happen, humanity must model all the interactions in nature, which is an extremely chaotic system, to a very high degree of certainty. These interactions can be extremely complex, such as the psychological decisions of animals under different circumstances. And furthermore, who is modeling the modeler? The simple fact of trying to guess one's own decisions would impact their final decision. Let me explain this with an example. Suppose that as a country you want to decide if you should go to war with the neighboring country. You hand out polls to people asking if they want to go to war or not, and collect the polls and announce the results to the whole country. The simple act of announcing the poll results might change the decision of many of the citizens. As you can see, a country trying to think out loud by itself while trying to figure out if it should go to war or not ends up in more confusion. Finding the path to technological sustainability on time by trial and error by using the past and current observations on the direction of technology, as well as the short-term projections, is an improbable task. In such a complex system as the nature, the false solutions far exceed the number of true or harmonious, sustainable solutions. The nonlinearity of the nature and delayed feedbacks also prevent us from sensing the direction towards harmony by using local observations, trapping us to dead ends, just like in a maze puzzle. To put this into perspective, It is a much more difficult task than randomly mutating human DNA, and just by chance coming up with a healthy human. Most random mutations end up as cancers or disabilities. The difficulty of finding harmonious solutions on time increases exponentially with the complexity of the system. Artificial intelligence, AI, as a subsystem of the whole, faces similar limitations. In addition to these limitations, techno-utopians who imagine that AI will be their savior that brings the balance back into their lives fail to realize the fundamental problems of technology. The direction of technology cannot be predicted or controlled. Such an AI has to be much more complex than our modern civilization and self-learning to be able to have a better chance of coming up with a real solution to our problems. To be able to control this AI, techno-utopians should also be able to model its behavior. However, as we have already discussed, modeling and controlling the outcomes of a system that is more complex than oneself is improbable. Humans are not able to control the direction and outcomes of the current technological civilization, let alone a much more complex one. The false sense of improvement and security felt by the supporters of technology comes from their limited and naive view of the system that they depend on for their existence. Their view does not go beyond the false technological solutions, and, just like any addict, ignores or downplays the exponentially growing problems. Soon, we realize that the modeling approach to save us from the curse of false solutions is an improbable task to be accomplished, and a pipe dream for many people who don't want to face the reality. We cannot control each other, we co-evolve. Chapter 4: Connection to Animal Rights. The exploitation of non-human animals by humans wouldn't exist without the technology. Let's list some of the technologies that are used in the livestock industry to rape, abuse, kidnap, exploit and murder 75 billion land animals and few trillion marine animals each year. Fences, rods, ropes, chains, trucks, boats, fishnets, buckets, pumps, sperm injectors, blades, rape racks, heated plates, walls, artificial hormones, plastic packaging, refrigerators, slaughterhouses, tractors, pesticides, gas chambers, macerators, bolt guns, money. On top of this, the brainwashing by the mass media is everywhere. From the got milk propaganda by the dairy industry that made people falsely believe that milk is healthy and necessary for healthy bones, to the grass-fed propaganda by the meat industry that fooled people into thinking that they need to eat animal flesh to get protein, iron or omega-3 fatty acids. What they don't tell you is the weeks-old male calves being torn apart from their mothers and murdered for meat. Dairy cows also share the same fate after 5 or 6 years of being raped annually. Egg industry is not any better with their free-range propaganda, while conveniently hiding the truth about the day-old male chicks macerated to death for the production of eggs. Livestock industry is also the biggest cause of biodiversity loss, and, especially in Latin America, deforestation. It is also the second biggest cause of climate change, and a major driver of water pollution, ocean dead zones, freshwater consumption, antibiotic-resistant microbes, and zoonotic diseases. As if all these are not enough, on average, animal products are about 10 times less efficient than plant-based foods. That's why they need massive subsidies. Around 20% of the EU budget is spent on subsidizing the livestock industry to stay relevant and cover disproportionately more land compared to plant foods. The medical industry is closely connected with these food industries as they make huge profits by selling medications and surgeries to lessen the symptoms of, not to treat, the diseases of lifestyle. The medical industry, just like any other section of the technological civilization, is focused on maintaining and maximizing itself more than anything else. The same maximization tendency also explains the irrational behavior of expanding the livestock industry despite its incredible inefficiency. This, once again, proves that the technological civilization, as a system out of harmony with the rest, will follow the path that will maximize the exploitation of the rest. Indeed, almost all the social progresses occur if and only if they are beneficial for the technological progress. Generally speaking, most people are easily fooled, guided and forced by the values of the technological system rather than critical thinking and empathy. They are also very vulnerable to manipulation and addictions, such as addiction to animal products, due to their traumas inflicted by the unnatural living under the technological civilization, and exploitation, and distortion of their natural tendencies by it. Alienation from the animals and the nature, who we interact, is another outcome of the technological civilization. Hence, the progress in animal rights mostly depends on its usefulness in sustaining and spreading the technological progress. This usefulness might come from the scarcity of land or water for food production, developments in highly processed plant-based alternatives, etc. Animal rights activists are useful in informing the section of the population who already sincerely despise exploitation, and more often than not, if they are not hypocrites, these people are also against the technological exploitation of nature and less anthropocentric. I am saying, sincerely despise exploitation, because many people have weak internal moral compass and integrity, and they tend to pretend to be good people for selfish reasons and do good deeds to gain social status. These people would exploit others if the majority agrees with such exploitation, but never admit it to themselves or others. They tend to have relative morality rather than absolute morality, and ultimately see morality as a competition game to gain acceptance by others rather than to ensure well-being of others. We might argue that this is because of the disintegration of communities and indigenous cultures leading to individualistic win-lose type competition-based interactions, such as the modern economic, political and education systems, between humans taking over. Lose-lose and win-lose type interactions are more dominant in destabilized systems, e.g. technology versus nature, as they often lack real solutions that benefit both parties, especially in the long term. For this reason, most people exhibit relative morality. They do good to look good, to be accepted into the society. Usually, these people also tend to highly value traditions, and consider relating to respected organizations and groups, e.g. nationalism, sports team fanaticism, political parties, brand name worshipping, internalizing the company values and climbing the career ladder, etc., and the rules of the society as their top priority. As they lack absolute morality, they are full of contradictions and hypocrisies. They never go vegan if the majority of the society is not vegan. They might temporarily say that they are vegan, but they stop being vegan when they realize that it doesn't bring them the desired attention and acceptance. In the modern world, they might value hierarchies, materialism and superficiality, and be obsessed with socialization and power if they perceive these as a means to be accepted. Their values come from a place of fear, hence they usually never find peace. They tend to have chronic anger, suppressed or expressed, and confusion. These people are at high risk of addictions. As their focus on fear comes from past traumas, healing their traumas, currently the most crucial and difficult task for humanity, can make them move towards having absolute morality, implying a transition period. However, probably, the dynamics of this transition exhibits a tipping point behavior. Very few people exhibit absolute morality, very few people do good to do good. People with absolute morality mostly have their fears in check, and can adopt compassion and empathy as their primary drivers and values. Combined with self-discipline, these people usually go vegan, against animal exploitation. As they derive meaning and sense of belonging from their compassion as their main focus, they can find peace. They are usually very honest, straightforward, and they are not interested in playing mind tricks. They are more open to forgiving and more open-minded in their worldviews. They are less likely to be interested in social structures and rules, as they primarily follow their internal moral compass. We should realize that in a world where the exploitation of animals is seen as abhorrent, the exploitation of nature and wildlife should also be seen as so. Such a world, if informed enough, as this book intends to achieve, would be against technological progress. Many animal rights activists would be surprised to learn that the exploitation of nature is not necessary or even beneficial for human well-being, because what we do to nature, we do to ourselves. But exploitation is necessary for the expansion of the technological civilization. I can hear some of you saying, but consuming animal products is natural. There is nothing natural about using technology, as defined earlier, to enable domestication, guns, arrows, fish nets, trapping, artificial insemination, stealing babies and drinking milk from another species, especially as an adult. One would expect that people would have a better excuse for eating things, or I should correctly say beings, that are their leading cause of death. If consuming animal products was so natural for humans, who are indeed a great ape species along with practically herbivorous bonobos, chimpanzees, orangutans and gorillas, it wouldn't be the number one cause of their death. But we now know that this is indeed an addiction perpetuated by the technological civilization. There are also people who argue that wildlife lives in constant agony, running away from predators all the time until their miserable death by disease or predators, hence wildlife is not harmonious. These people confuse harmony with perfection. Also, they confuse longevity as a simple metric with the fulfillment from life. But even with their own metrics, wildlife still seems to be a reasonable choice. A study published in 2016 found out that the baseline mortality was lower in zoos for about 62% of the 59 mammalian species compared to wildlife. In the same study, the longevity of the species with a slower pace of life, i.e. a long lifespan, low reproduction rate and low mortality in the wild, was not drastically different between wildlife and zoos. Baseline mortality, defined as annual mortality observed at the age corresponding to the onset of senescence, was higher at zoos for most primates, and about half of the even-toed ungulates, hoofed animals such as hippopotamuses, antelopes, deer, giraffes, cattle, etc. Considering the extent of human impact on the wild mammal populations, the mortalities in the wild would probably be even lower than the figures reported in the study. Wildlife documentaries reflect a skewed view of wildlife by showing shocking moments, such as a chase or an attack, more often to gain viewers' attention, which creates a negative perception of nature. Another factor to consider is that without the wild predators eliminating the sick, the fitness of the wild animals would deteriorate. This is the yin and yang principle. In fact, in a world without predators, animals wouldn't feel the need to develop a central nervous system that was evolved to run away from predators, or to chase prey. Without prey-predator interaction, there would be plant-like animals, only moving fast enough to get to the next plant before they fully digest their food that they got from the previous plant. They would be even slower than snails, as snails still need to react fast enough to be able to hide in their shells. Wildlife, despite all the difficulties and imperfections, most of the time enjoys life in harmony with the rest. Wildlife is the best we have. The alternative is the destruction of life, exponentially growing problems, disintegration of connections, enslavement and isolation. We don't have a sustainable alternative to wildlife. Given the choice, I would prefer to be living in the wild rather than a zoo. Chapter 5: Connection to Human Rights. Just like the exploitation of non-human animals, exploitation of humans skyrocketed by the development of technologies. Technologies not just enabled these exploitations, but necessitated them. Slavery and militarization paralleled the technological growth, and it is still continuing today in more and more subtle ways. Alienation from the humans, who we directly or indirectly interact, is another outcome of the technological civilization. The invention of steam engine and other technologies triggered the rapid industrialization and the need for manual workers to collect the resources to feed the hungry industrial machine. At first, these human slaves were forbidden from learning how to read and write so they could be controlled easier. As the technological civilization required more and more technical knowledge that can be found in books, slavery had to evolve into its modern form. They mandated that children must go to school at an early age, and practically groomed to be the obedient parts of the technological machine. Slaves were no more enslaved by chains, but by the economic system and the modern culture shaped by the mass education and mass media. The technological system successfully made people adopt the values of it and cherish these values as the highest level of progress without much scrutiny. Despite the technological system requiring more and more divergence away from the natural ways of living and disintegrated communities making enslavement easier, supporters of the technological civilization argue that automation will free us all and end slavery forever. When they are rightfully pointed out to the fact that globally the work hours are not decreasing, they blame the governments, the economic system, or the capitalist system, etc., without realizing that these entities are also an essential part of the technological system that they are celebrating. Governments, the economic system, or the capitalist system were indeed selected by the technological civilization, because these systems were the ones which could expand it the fastest. And why does the technological civilization need expansion? Remember Figure 2 from the section, What is so bad about it and why? The technological civilization needs expansion because of the exponentially growing problems that it creates. If it stopped growing by ceasing the introduction of short-term, false solutions, the tensions created by it would become unbearable to most people. That's the fundamental reason behind the unlikeliness of having a stable economy, or a stable technological civilization. The exponential growth is baked into it. This explains the fundamental principle behind the well-known rebound effect, or Jevons paradox, in which increase in efficiency leads to further growth rather than stability. With this exponential growth comes the unsteady and ever more complicated life of the poor, clueless, modern slave. Similarly, human population numbers are also determined by the technological civilization in favor of the technological civilization. That's the reason why programs that try to reduce birth rates, such as the one-child policy in China, all fail. The system requires a certain amount of people to optimize its functioning. And not just the number of people, but also their behavior must be controlled in favor of the technological civilization. The technological civilization has convinced most people that the mobile phones, airplanes, cars, fridges and all the other gadgets are for their own good, that they are richer than the old kings. It is time to see it the other way around. What is so good about being dependent on material possessions to be happy and healthy? When we lived in pristine nature in our natural habitat, we were much richer than any human who ever lived under the technological civilization. We were like the gorillas in the wild, fulfilling all our basic and natural needs, and we have been reduced to gorillas in a circus, while being brainwashed into thinking that the scheduled meals, medical care, forced education, and toys makes us richer than those in the wild. Let's end this section with a very fitting quote: "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Chapter 6: Parallels with Addiction. Gain in the short term at the expense of well-being in the long term is the widely accepted definition of addiction. Drug addicts, including cigarette smokers and alcoholics, lose their health in the long term for the short-term pleasure of stress relief. Even the seemingly harmless behaviors, such as studying, cleaning, sex, using internet, watching TV, socializing, eating, going out, etc., turn into addictions. If only people could solve the root cause of their stress and feeling of emptiness, they wouldn't be making such bad decisions. Instead, they choose to adopt false solutions that, in the long term, create more problems. So, where do their stresses come from? They come from the previous false solutions of others, leading to the technological civilization. From the traffic, disintegration of communities, lack of access to nature, fear of future in a rapidly changing and disintegrating society, an environment, individualistic and competition-based education system, sense of lack of control, mass media, to job stress. Almost everything in the modern world create traumas in the human species that was designed to live in nature, not in a modern technological setting. Technology is indeed a destructive vicious cycle, an addiction. People with absolute morality are good at blocking the traumas and disturbances coming from the technological civilization, because they do not rely on societal structures for their internal balance. They don't grab on unhealthy connections, such as consuming animal products, smoking, drinking alcohol, toxic relationships, consumerism, etc., and they are very aware of the contrast of these unhealthy behaviors with their internal peace. Their roots are deep in the balance of Mother Nature. As long as their basic needs are met, these people are happy and satisfied with what nature gave them. People with relative morality cannot understand them, because they cannot imagine themselves managing their unrest and finding peace. We must be wise enough to give up our addictions, including our addiction to technology, for our own and our family's well-being. Our family includes our distant cousins, all the other species that are here with us on Earth. If not, in the light of the previous chapters, with a human population facing ever-growing problems and traumas, we can only expect an increase in the cases and severity of addictions and subsequent destruction. The sadder part is that while the humanity is not healing itself from its addictions, the wildlife will keep suffering from the heavy second-hand smoking. Chapter 7: Likely Outcomes of Technology. If you kept reading until now, it is likely that you have the courage to face the truth and agree with many points that I have raised. Now, the next step is to discuss the possible outcomes of the technological civilization with the ideas we have previously expressed. Let's start by realizing that the technological civilization is not compatible with the biological life. Furthermore, most humans, especially with the current population numbers and consumption levels that far exceeded the carrying capacity of Earth, are dependent on technology, and likely that they will not have the awareness, the will and the courage to gradually give up on technology and face the short-term consequences for the long-term gain. A gradual reduction in technology is only possible when the majority of people agree with such a policy, with great understanding, compassion, integrity, self-discipline, and sacrifice in the short term. These are the qualities of the wise sages. For this to happen, there must be an evolved and widely adopted mechanism within the human population towards acceptance and sharing of the truth, no matter how harsh it might be. And this mechanism must also be stable enough within the current and upcoming technological disturbances. At first glance, the discipline of science seems to be a good fit for this purpose. However, it is currently mostly funded and controlled by the technological machine, and this will not change. Hence, when it comes to its focus, modern science is not as objective as some people like to think. Scientists are also prone to having delusions and biases. And modern science is not even in most people's radar, hence not a usual direct medium for dissemination of wisdom to the masses. It is rather a source of information, to be carefully filtered to the masses through a mass media filter that favors the technological civilization. Modern science's main goal is not to seek for wisdom, but to come up with false solutions. In general, if we know one thing about people's organized behavior, they are very prone to delusions and they often sacrifice the truth and harmony for short-term emotional relief. They are far from exhibiting the behaviors of sages. As we have discussed, under the disturbance of the technological civilization, most people are motivated by fear and addictions more than anything else. I am yet to see such a preserved natural mechanism that might convince the majority of people to be rational under emotional distress caused by the technological civilization. If it existed, it would manifest itself by now. We cannot expect most people, especially people with relative morality, having healthy natural responses, such as acting sane and harmonious, under unnatural settings, especially if they are strongly connected to the technological civilization and associated cultures. If the majority of people do not agree with the gradual reduction in technology, the ones who favor reduction in technology have to compete with the rest to take control and stay in control, in a constant technological arms race. This, of course, creates a contradiction, hence, this scenario is not possible. People who are against technology would have more chances of being successful if they have organized sabotages against the technological system rather than trying to control the direction of its evolution. Disclaimer. The author does not support any violence in any form for ideological purposes. The conclusions drawn are merely the logical extensions of the previous ideas that have been discussed objectively and for educational purposes only. The technological system is more prone to collapse than most people think, due to the highly connected nature of the global technological system, its desperate need for growth, and the exponentially growing problems that it is causing. Finally, as the most likely outcome, the technological civilization can keep growing relatively undisturbed by humans until the technological system, or the ecosystem, or both, collapses. At this point, people who defend technology might assume that it will be a superior life form to biological life, hence it is worth pursuing the path of technology. There are three main reasons for this perceived superiority. First, the ability of technology to change, hence adapt, quicker than the biological life when there is no limitation of energy. Second, the exponential rapid growth of technology implying a so-called singularity in the near future, with a godlike, unifying runaway intelligence. And third, the perceived potential ability of technology to survive on other planets, hence a path towards the colonization of the universe by life. The first point can be dismissed by realizing that the adaptation ability not just depend on the processing power, which implies an ability to change faster, but also the efficiency of the processor and the limited nature of the available energy. It is known that today the human brain is much more energy efficient in processing data than the modern computers. When we realize that the modern technology often relies on highly inefficient thermal processes for its production, the situation gets even worse. In fact, without relying on the stored energy from the sun, fossil fuels as stored solar energy, the technological civilization would not be able to develop this rapidly, and the reliance of technology on stored solar energy is unsustainable, only giving it a relatively short burst of expansion and a temporary upper hand against the biological life. When the energy input is constant, such as from the sun, the complexity of the balanced state depends on the efficiency of the processes rather than the processing rates when the energy availability is not an issue. Hence, although a technological life might evolve and reach to an equilibrium state much faster than the biological life, the complexity and harmony, hence the beauty, of the attained state would not necessarily be superior to the biological life we have today. The second point can be dismissed by realizing that the exponential growth in technology is caused by the disturbance to the natural balance and is destroying much more than it is building. With this in mind, and by considering the energy efficiency and availability argument given in the previous paragraph, it is obvious that singularity is just a pipe dream and not a realistic outcome. The third point can also be dismissed by realizing that technological life would not have a better chance of surviving in alien environments to the environment it evolved in. Just like the biological life, technological life forms following an evolutionary path would require the existence of the circumstances, such as a given chemical composition, temperature range, etc., to be able to survive. Hence, as they would evolve on Earth, they would be adapted to Earth. The fittest who can fit to the Earth would survive and the rest will go extinct. And the more complex the technological life becomes, the more fine-tuned it will become, making it ever more difficult to survive on other alien environments. Hence, given enough time, and considering the energy efficiency argument as a limiting factor as well, there is no reason to believe that technological life would have a better chance of colonizing other planets than the biological life would. Figure 3 presents an algorithm describing the possible outcomes of the technological civilization. I hope that people will evaluate their lifestyles, habits and values in the light of this book. Until then, people who are aware of these issues will keep feeling like babysitting humanity. Now, time to live in harmony as nature intended.